Doctors and nurses of Reddit, have you ever witnessed a couple have a child that was obviously not the father's? If so, what happened?
Not a doctor, nurse, but my ex-girlfriend delivered a baby while I was in the delivery room, and turns out it wasn't mine. She was 16, I was 15. All along I was under the impression that this kid was mine, and time to be an adult. Took all the classes, read the books, worked every night. Weekend to save whatever money I could as a 15-year-old. I finally get the call she is in labor, so I have somebody rush me to the ER. Luckily for her, it wasn't a long labor, only about 6 hours. But there was a complication. The baby came out with the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck. Doctor assured us it was going to be okay, but the nurses were prepping for things to go south. Baby comes out, it's a light shade of purple, and the nurses immediately take the baby and put on the smallest mask you have ever saw to help it get oxygen, I guess. I was too panicked to ask a lot of questions. They state they need to keep the baby on watch overnight, so I stay in the room with the ex. The next evening, baby is back in the room with us, and all seems well. The ex is asleep, and the same nurse from the night before comes into the room and beckons me out. She states that at risk of her losing her job, she has to break some harsh news to me. That kid is not mine. She stated that while at this stage it wasn't obvious, over the next few weeks it would become clear this kid was mixed, and since both of us were white, it was a high probability that it wasn't mine. Cue a mixed bag of emotions, and me promptly waking the ex to get a little clarification. Come to find out, she knew the chances and was just hoping it was mine because it worked better for her. Apparently her father was old school racist, and she didn't want to have to deal with that. I left the hospital to collect my thoughts, and a few weeks later was served with child support papers. One DNA test, and about 6 weeks later, I am 0% that kid's father. Wherever that nurse is now, I hope your life is amazing. I understand that you are not supposed to get involved in the personal side of things and keep it professional, but you saved me a lot of additional headache. Similar, but I don't know where else to put it because it just makes me laugh. My aunt is a nurse in the maternity ward. She had a couple come in where they were both very black. Lady has baby and it is white AF. Like, totally pale, no trace of any pigment. They put the baby on her mom and the mom starts yelling about how this isn't her baby and they stole her baby. In all fairness, you can be very confused during / after delivery. It wasn't stupidity. Just sobbing and freaking out, and the father is just sitting there and looks very confused because he's realizing that even if she did cheat, there is no way the baby would be that white. The doctor and nurses are trying to assure her that this is her baby, and the skin usually darkens later. Come to find out, when he called his mom, she pointed out that they have a second cousin who is albino and maybe baby got that gene. Turns out that's what happened. Baby was albino. My fiancé's father is almost certainly not his biological dad. His mom was just a genuinely terrible human being who didn't even try to hide the fact she was cheating. But his dad loved him from the second he was born, and when the mom decided 4 years later she just didn't want the kid anymore, she just gave him to his dad and wrote off. Jay's dad ended up getting married, and they tried for kids before finding out his sperm count was too low to ever father children. They ended up adopting many years later. He sat my fiancé down when my fiancé was 13 and told him the truth, and that if Jay wanted to test they would, but it was up to him. Jay cried and told him he just wanted him to be his dad, and that was the end of that. Edit. I originally had put real dad instead of biological dad. Changed it when several people pointed out that the man who raised him is most certainly his real dad. I know a girl who was pregnant with her boyfriend's best friend's baby. He found out there was a possibility about a week before she gave birth. I went up to see her once he was born, and he looked just like the friend. There was no question. I broke the news to her boyfriend, and he was absolutely devastated. His parents were heartbroken and super pissed. They had bought the girl everything she needed, including a $500 car seat, stroller set. She refused to give anything back. She started up a relationship with the friend immediately after having their child, and they're still together a decade later. But the kicker for me has always been that the boyfriend and best friend were next-door neighbors. She moved into his house after coming home from the hospital, so her ex-boyfriend and his family had to see them basically every day raising this child that they had believed to be his for the entire pregnancy. I can't even imagine. I had a vasectomy. While chatting with the doctor, he told me about another patient. This guy had 3 kids and came in for the snip because he and his wife decided they were done having children. The doc opened up his sack and found nothing to snip. This guy was born without the ability to have any children. The poor doctor had to explain to him what happened. Imagine finding that out that way. I worked as a lab tech before I became a nurse. We had a set of twins in the NICU that were super early, and the mom was still in the or getting sewed up from the cesarean. I was drawing baby B's blood when mom was wheeled over to baby A's isolette. She was crying and said, "Oh, thank God you're not black. I have been so worried the last 7 months." So newborn babies, especially when they're born early, are very pink, almost red. So even if a baby was part black, their skin isn't necessarily dark yet. But looking at these babies, it was obvious they were going to be black. The shape of the face, the texture of the hair, and baby B that I was working on had an intense Mongolian spot. A few weeks later, my NICU nurse friend told me that the babies were now on a no-info status, meaning security alert, can't give anyone information about them, can't refer to them by name, etc. She said there was a huge fight because the mom's husband, white guy, obviously noticed that the babies were half black and that mom had cheated on him and got pregnant. The real dad, black guy, came in and didn't realize the mom was even married. Those poor babies. I had the opposite happen, sort of. My wife and I are both brown-skinned, dark-haired half Mexicans, and our moms are both 100% white blondes with blue and green eyes. So we sort of knew it was a crapshoot with our baby, but the nurse who was assisting with delivery had no idea. At one point she gets sort of nervous and calls for help, and another, I guess more senior nurse came in and nodded and came over to talk to me. I thought there was something wrong with the baby as she comes over and stumbles through some questions. So I was the father, and no one else was coming, etc. Then finally she awkwardly asks if either of us happened to be blonde growing up. I said yeah, I was, and both the baby's grandparents are blonde as they come, and this wave of relief went over her, and she brought me over to see this blonde as hell crowning baby head. It's funny because he looks just like me if you applied a gringo Instagram filter. We often get awkward questions about his heritage, and my wife always hits them with, "Yeah, we're not sure if he's mine." It's always funny to see people nod for a moment and then go, "Wait, what?" Had a college buddy whose fiancée was pregnant. They were the perfect couple. Both had just over a year with great careers starting out. Everything was butterflies and rainbows. Fast forward to the delivery room. They're in there and out comes a very black baby. He's quite the pale redhead, and she's a blonde/blue eyes Texas girl. He made sure everyone was okay, waited for her parents to arrive, and left without saying a word. He moved all his stuff out of the house while she was in the hospital, and cut off all communications with her, just walked out of their lives in the most stone-cold act I'd ever seen. They were together for 9 years, and he just left cold turkey. She tried to contact him at his job a few times, but he quickly moved up the ladder and eventually got a job in another city. He told me once that he took solace in the fact that her family had already dropped about $10,000 in a wedding that never happened. I used to work with a guy whose wife was pregnant. Near time for delivery, everyone at our place of business had a big party with gifts, money, etc. So big day comes. Water breaks. They get in car to go to hospital. She breaks the news on the way there it's not his. The kid is another race, and if he could just drop her off at the hospital and then leave, that would be great. He took a few days off work, found a new apartment, moved out, filed divorce, etc. He called into work and told someone what happened. News spread pretty fast. All congratulations cards, etc. were cleaned up and thrown away. Everyone was very sensitive to his pain. Except, somehow, I don't know how, I did not get the news. So on his first day back, I walked into the office he shared with 6 to 7 other guys and said, Hey, Daddy-o, how's fatherhood so far? Getting any sleep? Got some pictures? Let's see the little tyke. He slowly lifted his head to look at me with a painful look. The room was dead silent. One of his workmates stood up, grabbed my arm, and walked me out of the room, shushing me. What happened? I asked. Did it die? What's the problem? When he told me I about died myself, I still feel bad for the dude, and it's been 30 years. Happened to my fiancé's mom. His mom is a labor and delivery nurse. One time she had a patient whose parents were present during her stay at the hospital. The staff there have a whiteboard with some general information about the patient's like blood type, time spent in the wing, and like how far along. This information is nameless for HIPAA reasons and instead has a patient's number. So this patient happened to be the only one in the wing at the time. Her father was walking back from the cafeteria at one point and noticed the board. He stopped one of the nurses and asked if the blood type for the patient on the board was correct. He knew his daughter was the only patient there. It was B+. The nurse confirmed it was correct. Turns out he knew his and his wife's blood type. He was O+ and his wife was A-. This combination will never yield AB+ baby. He brings his wife out and just points at the board, and this look of shock washes over her. In brief, father of patient in labor finds out his wife cuckolded him 25 years later by knowing his blood type. Punnett squares. I am a nurse working in labor and delivery. Most of the time, if the mom thinks the baby may not be her boyfriend's husband's, they will just have their friend, sister, mom with them there for the delivery and have the dad come to the hospital room after seeing the baby. No guarantees because babies can change a lot over a couple weeks. Many African American babies have very light skin when they are born and it gets darker. I have had a point's husband get upset about the baby being too light. They were both black. Until his mom smacked him and told him that's what he looked like when he was born. Recently I had something I thought was interesting happen. Girl comes in labor with her boyfriend, sister, and a friend. Boyfriend doesn't seem too engaged during the process, but that's not uncommon. Baby is born and is fine. Sister sends dad to get some stuff. Note here all people involved are Hispanic and only speak Spanish. My specific medical Spanish is pretty decent, and I can get you through an epidural or delivery. Most things that come up pretty well, but I am not fluent. So as soon as the dad leaves, the sister is like, I have a question for you, and then process to say something I can't understand at all. I try to clarify, but I'm just not getting it. I offer to go get the translator. She's like, no, I don't want it to be official. She whips out her phone and through Google Translate asks, how can we get a paternity test in the hospital? I then have to explain that we really don't do that, but you can get one at CVS. They tell me that the baby doesn't look like the other child of this mom and this guy, and that it might be someone else's, but they want to check before telling him. So I just apologize and tell them how they can get a DNA test at CVS, and they are like $50. This isn't the first time I've been asked about paternity testing. Just had no idea how you say it in Spanish. Edit. Thank you to all the people telling me how to say paternity test in Spanish. I appreciate the effort and will try to remember it, but I also have Google Translate. I just didn't understand the words at the time she was asking me, which is why I offered to get a translator. It's not generally accepted for nurses to use their phones to translate at work. Also, yes, you can get a DNA test at CVS. I believe someone in the comments has posted a link. You can also get a DNA test done at a clinic, but it generally costs more. The first time the paternity test thing came up, I asked my manager, who said to refer them to CVS, which is what I have heard other nurses do as well. Some hospitals used to offer paternity testing, but many no longer do because it is not usually seen as medically necessary, and as such usually isn't covered by Medicaid or insurance, so the hospital ends up eating the cost. I am not saying that there are no hospitals that still do paternity testing, just that it is not the case at any of the hospitals I have worked at in my area. You don't know anyone else's life circumstances, so it is best to reserve judgment about the choices they have made, or you think they may have made, because not every situation is cut and dry. Plenty of biological fathers leave and do not support their children. Women are not all lying villains. Life is very gray. Just treat people with respect and compassion. Not a doctor, but witnessed, heard a full-on Jerry Springer episode in real life while also recovering from childbirth of our own. So, we were in the hospital for a few days already due to complications with our delivery, ended up staying a total of 13 days, and had begun to notice that there were constantly people in the hall outside our room making very hushed phone calls. We would keep the door closed, but while these calls, while hushed, were still kinda audible to us, especially when they got louder and we got quiet to listen. There was a huge gap under our door. Apparently they were our neighbors from down the hall, and our door was just far enough away from their room that they felt comfortable to speak right outside it. Initially, the bits we caught piqued our curiosity, so we started to pay more attention. We learned the husband had left soon after the baby was born. Not sure when exactly, but the initial calls we heard were the family trying to track him down and get him to return to the hospital. It must have worked, because about a day later we heard man and woman outside outdoor having a conversation. It started with a sentiment similar to, "I'm not sure where we stand, Mom," and escalated to a direct, "F*** this, Linda. Your daughter is a W***re. I'm divorcing her." Side note, this is the only name I remember of the family in question. This must have rubbed some people the wrong way, especially Linda's husband, the guy's father-in-law, who came down to give him a piece of his mind. He began yelling at the guy about being a man and doing the right thing. We were on the edge of our seats. Then the guy started yelling back about the dad being a drunk and a loser. I remember he was laughing incredulously about the suggestion of taking advice from, this is a quote, "an asshole degenerate like yourself." And that's when all hell broke loose, I guess. All we heard was grunts, bangs on the wall, a ton of "UMFGR" and "USOB," and Linda giving a mix of taunts and criticism, such as, another quote here, "Now look what you made him do, little man." Not quite sure who that was for, actually. Of course I wanted to look out there, but I was being held with a tight grip on the wrist and a glaring side-eye that kept me in our room. The fighting went on forever, it seemed. The hospital was tight on security, so I don't know how the hell this happened. It was probably only 30 to 60 seconds, but eventually we hear a woman yelling for them to break it up and, "Knock it off, Dad." This was the new mom. We were practically glued to the back of the door now, listening to the drama. She proceeded to explain to them all that it was okay that, I forget his name, didn't want to sign the documents, because she was done with him anyway. She paused and her husband and parents tried to tell her to calm down. And she doesn't know what she's saying and to let cooler heads prevail later. Pretty insightful for two grown men who just threw down in the maternity ward of a hospital, but I digress. Anyway, she calmly confirms everyone's suspicions that it is not her husband's child. Even though we were trying to be quiet, I'm pretty sure our gasps were heard through the door. This was intense. The wife then announced, quite proudly, that the baby was her husband's brother's, and she had been sleeping with him since before they were married. Oh. The husband starts to lose it, repeating, "Are you kidding me?" louder and louder. Then we hear the parents too, saying the same thing. They're all turning on her. Then Dad says in a very annoyed tone, "Honey, we know it's not husband's baby, and we know it's not his brother's. We're white, your husband and his brother are white, and your baby is not." We couldn't hold back anymore, and I remember saying out loud, very loud, "Oh, she it." We were laughing so hard that they obviously heard us. They scampered down the hall to their room. Never knew what happened and got an update from the nurse a few hours later that they had been checked out. And this is the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and don't forget to comment an anecdote or experience similar to the topic of the video. Leave your like, share if you like the video, and lastly, don't forget to activate the little bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. Bye-bye.